13th day of September, 1862, will be a day that long remembered in American history. At Fredericksburg, Maryland, thousands of men fought and died on one of the bloodiest battlefields of the American Civil War. One of the most brilliant stories of that day was written by a band of 1,200 men who went into battle wearing a green sprig in their hats. They bore a proud heritage and a special courage given to those who had long fought for the cause of freedom. I am referring, of course, to the Irish Brigade. In the fall of 1862, after serving with distinction and gallantry in some of the toughest fighting of this most bloody struggle, the Irish Brigade was presented with a new set of flags. In the city ceremony, the city chamberlain gave them the motto, "The Union, our country, and Ireland forever." Their old ones having been torn to shreds by bullets in previous battles, Captain Richard McGee took possession of these flags on December 2nd in New York City and arrived with them on the Battle of Fredericksburg and carried them in the battle. Today, in recognition of what these gallant Irishmen and what millions of other Irish have done for my country, and through the generosity of the Fighting 69th, I would like to present one of these flags to the people of Ireland.
This address by John F. Kennedy to the joint houses of the Oireachtas took place in June of 1963, just months before the 101st anniversary of the Battle of Fredericksburg. I'm going to use Ultimate General Civil War to look at the real story of the banner he presented and of the Irish who took part in that battle. But to do so, we first need to understand the story of how the Irish found themselves at Fredericksburg on the 11th to the 15th of December, 1862. Prior to and immediately after US independence, the majority of Irish immigrants to America were Ulster Protestants of Scottish descent. They integrated easily with their co-religionists. They played a leading role in the American Revolutionary War, and they became important political leaders in its aftermath. This changed with deteriorating economic conditions in Ireland from the 1820s onwards, which saw increasing numbers of impoverished Irish Roman Catholics arrive. Unskilled and uneducated, they took low-paying jobs that Americans didn't want to do, and were viewed with suspicion because of their religion. Fears that Irish and German Catholic migrants would try to seize the United States for the Pope led to the foundation of the Native American Democratic Association in 1835, popularly known as the Know-Nothings. Attempts were initially made in the 1820s to curtail the number of migrants enlisting in the United States Army, but by the 1840s, manpower requirements meant that all such prohibitions were lifted. However, within the army, discrimination against migrants and Catholics was rife, such as regulations that forced them to attend Protestant religious service. Desertion rates by migrants remained high, and during the Mexican-American War, Roman Catholic defectors formed the St. Patrick's Battalion of the Mexican Army. Commanded by Irish-born Major John Riley and made up primarily of Irish troops, the San Patricios were used by nativist Know-Nothings to argue that Irish Catholics would never be loyal to the United States and could not be trusted. This newest wave of anti-Irish and anti-Catholic sentiment coincided with floods of Irish migrants fleeing the Great Hunger. In 1848, as Ireland was racked by famine, radicals formerly connected with Daniel O'Connell's repeal movement instigated a disastrous rebellion. Led by Thomas Francis Maher, the revolutionaries failed to raise the starving population, and the rebellion itself lasted only a few hours. Maher and the other revolutionaries were exiled to what was then Van Diemen's Land, from where he escaped in 1852. In May of that year, he arrived in New York City, where 25% of the population was now Irish-born. Here, another exile of the 1848 rebellion, John O'Mahony, founded the Fenian Brotherhood, a sister organisation to the Irish Republican Brotherhood in Dublin, both committed to the overthrow of British rule in Ireland. Another of the Fenian Brotherhood's founders was Sligo native Michael Corcoran, who had fled Ireland in 1849 to avoid arrest in connection with attacks on landlords. He joined the 69th New York State Militia, which drew heavily from the Irish community, and was eventually promoted to command the regiment in 1859. The following year, in October of 1860, New York City pulled out all the stops for a visit by Edward, the Prince of Wales, with a celebratory ball held in his honour and a parade of military units through the city. The Irish of New York, however, were not all that inclined to honour the Famine Queen's son. Corcoran refused to attend the ball and withdrew the 69th from the parade, claiming that they had participated in the legally required number of ceremonies for the year. This was true, but his commanding officers were furious, and the nativist Know-Nothings, now associated with the Republican Party, held this up as further proof of Irish disloyalty. Corcoran was arrested for disobedience and ordered to face a court-martial. However, it would never be convened. The Irish in the United States heavily supported the Democratic Party, which opposed anti-immigrant nativism and the abolition of slavery. The Irish viewed abolition as an attack on a constitution which guaranteed them rights and protections denied to them in Ireland, and they feared that abolition would lead to upwards of 4 million former slaves competing with them in the labour market. The Republican Party, on the other hand, was the new refuge of the Know-Nothings, anti-immigrant nativists who wanted to extend by 2 years the process of becoming a naturalised citizen. In November of 1860, the Irish supported Stephen Douglas in the presidential election, but the victory went to Republican Abraham Lincoln. Before his inauguration and Corcoran's court-martial, 7 southern states which had backed the Southern Democratic candidate seceded from the Union and formed the Confederate States of America. The Irish were initially sympathetic to the Confederate position, but the attack on Fort Sumter on the 12th of April, 1861, galvanized their support for the Union. Corcoran committed the men of the 69th New York Militia to the Union cause, and with Washington under immediate threat, his court-martial was quashed and he was ordered to join the defence of the capital. Irishmen flocked to the 69th, and Corcoran brought the regiment up to a strength of 1,000 men, including a unit of Zouaves, which were recruited by Thomas Francis Maher. These became Company K of the regiment. On the 23rd of April, the 69th marched through the lower east end of Manhattan, where they were presented with a silk American flag by prominent members of the Irish community. This joined the green regimental banner that they had been awarded after snubbing the visit of the Prince of Wales the year beforehand. From here they marched past St. Patrick's Cathedral and on to the pier, from where they departed to bolster the defence of Washington. 3 months later, with the capital secured, Brigadier General Irvin McDowell marched out to engage the Confederate forces near Manassas Junction. 18,000 troops under the command of Tyrone-born Major General Robert Patterson, the president of the Friendly Sons of St. Patrick, held a smaller Confederate army in the nearby Shenandoah Valley, but they were able to escape Patterson and reinforce Major General P.G.T. Beauregard. On the 21st of July, at what became known as the First Battle of Bull Run, the first major engagement of the American Civil War, the 69th New York formed part of Colonel William Sherman's 3rd Brigade and made 2 charges on the Confederate lines. They were in the process of making a third when Sherman gave orders to withdraw, telling the men to get away as fast as they could from approaching cavalry. In the retreat, the 69th's regimental colours were briefly lost, and Colonel Michael Corcoran was captured in a Confederate charge on the now panicked Union forces. Maher attempted to rally the troops until his horse was shot from under him. He was knocked unconscious and only saved from capture by a member of the 2nd US Cavalry. As the defeated Union forces withdrew to Washington, the Irishmen of the 69th were hailed for their orderly withdrawal in comparison to that of other regiments. With Corcoran in captivity and the initial 3-month contracts of the men running up, Maher returned to New York in August with plans to raise an Irish Brigade. With the support of the Lincoln administration and the War Department, Maher was promoted to Brigadier General and given permission to recruit 4 more regiments. The reorganized 69th New York Infantry Regiment was joined by the 63rd and the 88th New York, the 28th Massachusetts, and the 116th Pennsylvania. The Irish who joined these regiments did so for a number of reasons. Economic considerations were most certainly among them, and this would become more and more of a driving factor as the war continued, especially from 1864 onwards. But they were also motivated by ideological concerns. Service in the Civil War gave them an opportunity to prove their loyalty to the United States, to defend the Constitution and preserve the Union as a refuge for the Irish who would continue fleeing the dire economic conditions in Ireland for the foreseeable future. The Fenians also viewed the Civil War as an opportunity for Irishmen to gain military experience that would later be put to use in the cause of Irish freedom. Maher declared that, "It is a moral certainty that many of our countrymen who enlist in this struggle for the maintenance of the Union will fall in the contest. But even so, I hold that if only 1 in 10 of us come back when this war is over, the military experience gained by that one will be of more service in the fight for Ireland's freedom than would be that of the entire 10 as they are now." In September of 1861, during a speech given at the funeral of Fenian Terence McManus, the audience called for 3 cheers for Maher, Corcoran and the men of the 69th. Maher then stood and called for 3 cheers for the sons of John Mitchell, another exiled 1848 leader, who were fighting on the Confederate side that had imprisoned Corcoran. The cheers were given heartily. Mitchell, Maher and other Fenian leaders looked positively on Irish involvement in the Civil War, regardless of which side they fought on. This attitude would change, however, as casualties mounted and Fenian circles were dissolved due to a lack of members. For now, enthusiasm and the spectacular oratory of Thomas Francis Maher drove recruits into the ranks of the Irish Brigade. In March of 1862, only the 3 New York regiments were at full strength when they were assigned to the Army of the Potomac, under the command of the popular Major General George McClellan. They served with distinction throughout the Peninsula Campaign and the 7 Days' battles. James Quinlan from Clonmel was awarded the Medal of Honor for leading the 88th New York in a charge at Savage's Station against a Confederate artillery position, and it was also given to Peter Rafferty of the 69th for wounds he received at the Battle of Malvern Hill. The losses, however, were devastating, and Maher returned to New York on a badly needed recruiting drive in July of 1862. When the 69th New York had entered the Battle of Fair Oaks the month beforehand, they numbered 750 men. They were now reduced to below 300. The 88th and the 63rd also saw hundreds killed, wounded and missing. The questions began to be asked of why the casualties were so high, and some of the blame was placed on Maher, who favoured using outdated muskets so that the Irish could fire buckshot and a ball, which could be deadly at close range, and then follow up with a bayonet charge. Rumours also grew that Maher had been drunk at the Battle of Bull Run, which was the reason why he had fallen from his horse, and that he had abandoned Corcoran on the field. Maher secured only 250 new recruits, so the brigade was under strength when it was ordered into battle at Antietam on the 17th of September 1862. The Confederate centre had established a strong defensive position behind the bank of a sunken road, from where they had already repulsed 3 Union charges. As the Irish Brigade advanced through the cornfield leading to the sunken road, Confederate artillery literally cut lanes through their ranks. They got to within 30 feet of the Confederate position and fired 5 or 6 volleys, but could not break through. Maher again had his horse shot from under him and had to be carried off the battlefield, after which Brigadier General John Caldwell's 1st Brigade was ordered forward to relieve the Irish. Caldwell's men would clear the sunken road, but it was the Irish Brigade who would be given much of the credit for the victory. The Battle of Antietam remains the bloodiest day in American military history, with almost 23,000 men dead, wounded or missing, and errors in President Kennedy's speech 101 years later indicate that he initially intended this battle to be the focus of his presentation. The Irish Brigade had earned praise and glory for their charge on the sunken road, but it came at considerable cost. The 63rd and 69th regiments had lost up to 60% of their men, and the already weakened brigade as a whole had suffered some 540 casualties. Irish support for the war, already wavering due to the high losses, would be challenged further in the months ahead. Days after Antietam, President Lincoln declared the Emancipation Proclamation that would take effect from the 1st of January 1863. What had been a war to preserve the Union was now a battle for a Republican policy largely unpopular with the Irish, who saw it as an attack on the Constitution. Matters only worsened when Lincoln relieved General McClellan after the Battle of Antietam for his failure to hunt down Robert E. Lee's retreating Confederates. Lincoln considered McClellan to be overly cautious, but he was massively popular among the Irish, as this was viewed as an unwillingness to risk his troops' lives unnecessarily. McClellan's replacement, Major General Ambrose Burnside, pushed the Army of the Potomac into Virginia with plans to move rapidly on the Confederate capital of Richmond. Pontoon bridges were requisitioned to bring the troops across the Rappahannock River near the city of Fredericksburg, across from which the army arrived on the 18th of November, but the pontoons were delayed for over a week. All they could do was wait and watch as Confederate forces poured into the area and dug formidable defences to the south of the city. On the 2nd of December, a delegation from New York was presented with the Irish Brigade's national and regimental colours, which had been shredded in the Battle of Antietam. New colours were sponsored by the merchants of New York and manufactured by Tiffany & Co., but these had not yet arrived when Burnside finally ordered his men to begin assembling the pontoon bridges across the river on the 11th of December. The Irish Brigade crossed on the following morning, and on the 13th, as they prepared to charge Marye's Hill, Maher told them, "In a few moments you will engage the enemy in a most terrible battle, which will probably decide the fate of this glorious, great and grand country, the home of your adoption. This day you will strike a deadly blow to those wicked traitors, and bring back to this distracted country its former prestige and glory." Well, at least he was right about the terrible battle part. To recount the actions and deeds of the Irish Brigade and the Irish scattered throughout other units on both sides, I'm going to play the Battle of Fredericksburg in Ultimate General Civil War as the Confederacy. God save the South. Welcome my friends, this is Maniacal Incorporated, addressing you directly for the first time this video, as opposed to reading at you from a script. And you join me in the city of Fredericksburg, where you and I, dear viewer, we will do battle with the Yankee devils and drive them back to Washington. It is early in the morning of the 11th of December, 1862. The Confederates hold the city of Fredericksburg. They're not too pushed about holding it. Their main job at this point in time is to harass the Union forces, which will be crossing from this region and further downstream. And already, at this early stage, we can see some Irish on the field. Not Irish troops, but Irish buildings. So these are the pontoon bridges. There's one further down here, and there's another one then further down off the map. Some of these were constructed, or the construction was aided by the 15th New York Engineers under the command of Derry Bourne, Captain Felix Larkin, and I added a picture in the intro of the 15th Engineers taken from Damian Shiels' fantastic blog. There's a link below in the description to that. That's going to be used very heavily throughout this video. Shiels has done absolutely amazing work in rooting through the pension applications and through the historical archives and through handwritten letters from the troops. He has made an absolutely fantastic blog. I would highly recommend that you go and check that out. He's also written a book on the topic. He's written a number of books on the topic of the Irish in America. Some of the other sources which are used here, if you're interested in them, predominantly The Harp and the Eagle by Susannah Ural Bruce, which is absolutely fantastic. And if you had to go and buy some book on this topic, it would be that one. And Thomas Craughwell's The Irish Brigade, which is good, goes into depth in the battles a lot more than Susannah Ural Bruce's work. But already, like I said, we can see some Irish units, constructions. And we're going to see, from Sumter's position here, we're going to see some units crossing across. We're going to see one coming down in this direction. The 11th and 12th of December is the crossing of the Union forces into Fredericksburg. The 13th is the main attack, which we'll be seeing next. So we're going to skip kind of from the 11th to the 13th. And we have, I was going to say we don't have a lot of Irish here in this first phase. It's going to take the Union a bit of time to actually come off this hill and do something. Never mind. Here comes Owen. So this is the Philadelphia Brigade, commanded by Joshua T. Owen. Born in Carmarthen in Wales, they've been routed and are being driven back. And before they go off the bridge, I'll just pause very quickly, because in that regiment is the 69th Pennsylvania. As far as I know, it was actually named in honour of the 69th New York. It's founded by Joshua Owen, and it is given the nickname of Paddy Owen's Regulars, in honour of the amount of Irish in it. Pennsylvania would be an area with a high Irish population. So there he goes. Today it's commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Dennis O'Kane from Derry. We'll be seeing them. They'll be back again in a minute. Don't you worry. We haven't seen the last of Owen and his Irish in this battle. We're also seeing down in this direction. Here is Hall's unit. Before he gets in too quickly, I'll just pause very quickly. The 3rd Brigade under Hall. This includes the 20th Massachusetts Regiment. And there are some accounts that it's made up of about 50% Irish troops, the regiment. F and G Coy of the regiment are heavily Irish. And it's also known as the Harvard Regiment. Now, apparently this is a term that doesn't come into use until the early 1900s. But there's supposed to be a chunk of kind of Harvard graduates in the regiment. So very quickly, two things that we'll address. Like I said, Dennis O'Kane from Derry, Lieutenant Colonel. I'll have to say that word a couple of times, and if you hear me saying Lieutenant, that is the way that it's said in the British Army, and then that's the way that we adopt it in Ireland. But in the United States, it's Lieutenant, so you might hear me saying Lieutenant at some stages. As Gaeilge, we put the F in there for the word Lieutenant. What's going to happen is that basically communities are going to... We'll probably start it up, actually, because they do tend to move a bit slowly. Communities will basically form companies, which could be upwards of about 100 men. These companies will then come together to form a regiment. Now, sometimes you'll have Irish companies and you'll have so many of them come together that they can basically form an ethnic Irish regiment. So we'd be talking about the things like the 69th New York. We're in 100% cover, and we have 100% morale. There's Owen again, and Arnold has come across with the artillery. So we can see, actually, if we take a look at Barksdale, 46 deaths, 315 kills because of the strength of the cover. And that is something to bear in mind. We'll try and get the sharpshooters to put some pressure on the artillery. The skirmishers here... It's going to be tough to hold this position, especially against an army the size of Hall's. In many cases, the Irish are able to form ethnic Irish regiments. But in many other cases, we'll say, such as here with the 20th Massachusetts, it's only a handful. Well, then again, potentially 50%, like I said. Now, if I am correct, those are the two main regiments of Irish that we see on the initial... push into Fredericksburg on the 11th. Our job is to defend the church as the Confederates. If you know anything about the Battle of Fredericksburg, and if you know maybe how this game works, you have a pretty good idea, I would say, of why I have picked the Confederate position. Whether or not we succeed in defending this place, it doesn't really make an ounce of difference. The second day of the battle is going to continue. Our job is predominantly just to harass these forces, but I think we've seen all the major Irish units that are involved on the 11th. Yeah, we're seeing a hefty presence coming across the bridge. Barksdale might well be able to resist these charges because he's in cover. We're seeing Kimball, Palmer, and... I thought we were seeing 3 units, so Kimball is being driven back. If we can get the sharpshooters in to put some more pressure on. Let's see if we can rout these guys, and the other unit, Hall's unit. Now the problem is that these units can't go off the map, so they kind of get into a bit of trouble. They kind of get stuck. These guys, if they can at least hold Hall there, then that's a good job. Barksdale has taken a bit longer than I would have anticipated to get rid of Palmer's troops. Okay, we're seeing him being driven back. I'll pause very quickly for a second. I have this kind of order of the things that I want to go through in, and I'm going to talk about these guys, I'm going to talk about Owen, I'm going to talk about Hull, I'm going to talk about the 69th and the Irish Brigade. It's all well and good to have plans until men start running across the bridge at you, shooting and firing and bullets going everywhere. So I'll take a quick break just to address the Irish Brigade. The Irish Brigade is not involved in the attacks on the 11th of December, the attempts to get across the bridge. The Union will push into Fredericksburg on the 11th, and they will basically immediately begin to loot the place. The 69th Pennsylvania, as part of Paddy Owens, or Paddy Owens Regulars, part of the Philadelphia Brigade, they will take part in the looting. Susannah Ural Bruce, in her work, The Harp and the Eagle, she's going to say that one of them writes a letter saying that anything could be had, silver plate, anything. They have a mighty old time looting the place. The Irish Brigade, Maher's Brigade, will come across on the 12th, and they will stay somewhere, I think, in this region. On the morning of the 13th of December, Maher will address each of the regiments of the brigade individually. Usually he would just address the brigade as a whole. He addresses them each individually. He tells the orderlies to distribute green sprigs of evergreen boxwood to the men of the brigade. They had handed over their banners and flags on the 2nd of December to a delegation from New York, so they don't actually have any as they go into battle, and this is going to represent their Irish heritage, a bit of green in the hats of the men. They proceed down in this direction, which I believe one of the two of these is Sophia Street. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put up a map. I'll put it up here just briefly from the Wikipedia page on the battle, showing the historical city and the kind of the similarities and how well represented this is. It's not perfect, but it's very well represented. So one of these two is Sophia Street. They're going to wander down in this direction, and they're going to get to about here, which is Georgia Street. So I believe this is it. This street here that kind of twists in a way that it doesn't on the maps. I think that's Georgia Street. So they're going to head down in that direction on the 13th. They're going to cross the mill race and continue on for Marye's Hill. We can just see some of the Confederate position, the defensive position, the stone wall. Now, when they are proceeding, they have been ordered, all the officers have been ordered off of horseback. We'll start up again and see if we can hold this place. All of the officers have been ordered off of horseback, and they are marching on foot. And one man that's having a lot of trouble is Thomas Francis Maher. His knee has been badly injured, possibly because of the amount of horses that have fallen on it. And once they cross the mill race, which Maher has tremendous difficulty in, Maher is going to turn back for his horse as his men continue on, and you can see there's not much of a distance to Marye's height at that stage. Maher is not going to take part in the charge on Marye's height, and it's something that he's going to be not necessarily criticized for. There will be allegations of cowardice, there will be allegations of drunkenness thrown at Maher in later years. They don't come from contemporaries, and they don't come from the men under his command. Some of them will say that Maher was very inclined, maybe overly inclined, to send his men into dangerous scenarios to win prestige and honour for himself. But there's going to be a number of allegations against Maher in later years. Some people are very severe on his historical record, on his military record. Of course, before coming to the United States, basically the only command that he held was the failed 1848 rebellion. Maher's reputation in the Irish-American community is going to be... It's a strange one, predominantly because, quite unusual for an Irishman, he supports the Republican Party. So most of the Irish, of course, support the Democrats. Kimball's men have been routed. We have 22 something, I won't say seconds, but we have 22 of them, whatever they are, to hold the city. It's entirely possible that they'll push in now and drive us back. The Confederates, like I said, did not actually hold the city. As the Irish are marching on the 13th, shells are landing on Sophia Street from the Confederate positions. And as they reach Georgia Street and march in this position, so the Confederate positions are absolutely staggering. And it's one of the reasons that I'm playing as the Confederacy, is the way that we can actually get a look at what the Union had to attack. So Owen and the 69th Pennsylvania have gone in again. Palmer's troops have gotten on to the pontoon, and Morgan is holding the pontoon with some artillery. If Hall was to march up, we would be screwed. There are some problems with the AI. This game was released in 2017. I'm sure there are mods in Total War. I'd say Kimball is going to make a mad rush across the pontoon. There are probably mods in Total War, like Napoleon Total War, that allow you to play in the Civil War. But that's just like two units pointing at each other and firing guns. Here what we have is historically accurate representations of the battlefield. Historically accurate representations of the units. There are criticisms that the units can move from point A to point B a lot faster than they would have been able to in real life. And there are also kind of problems with... we're going to see units that would have made one charge in the Battle of Fredericksburg making 5 or 6. And we're going to see casualty numbers way beyond what would have actually been seen at the Battle of Fredericksburg. I think we're about to see the defense of the city come to an end. There we go. We can continue the mission, or we can finish the mission, or continue the fight. We will finish. We're happy out. We've done a good job. So we are going to withdraw from the town in good order early on the morning of the 11th and allow the 69th Pennsylvania to loot to their heart's content. So here is the next phase of the battle. We have pushed forward to the 13th of December, and this part of the battle is going to be split up into about 4 parts. I'm going to get through the first 2 of them, and we'll see then from there on in, because the next 2 kind of depend on how you do with the first 2. This conflict is going to be split into 2 parts. Here's Fredericksburg, here's Marye's Height, and down here is Prospect Hill. So we're dealing with, I think, this part of the battle first of all. This would be the left Grand Division of the Union Army. So you can see there's the 2 pontoon bridges that Owen and Kimball were fighting, were crossing to attack Barksdale. Down here then is where Hall came across. So here are another 3 pontoons that the Union forces have crossed, and they're going to make a charge on Prospect Hill. So the left Grand Division, commanded by Major General William B. Franklin. So we can skip this. It's going to give us a bit of a kind of a discussion on the historical aspect. I'll actually push through because I'm gonna do this when we get to Marye's Height. Here's our position. Hell's bells. Look at the forces that we have. So concentrated on Prospect Hill. Our objective is to hold Prospect Hill. So we have some stone walls We're going to learn the utility and the use of stone walls. Oh boys, we're gonna learn that utility. There are some Union forces positioned over here as well, in a rather odd position. And we have Stuart, and we have... Where's the man himself? There's so many units, it's actually hard to make out. As far as I know, Stonewall Jackson is around here somewhere, or he might appear later on. He might be sleeping in. He's around here somewhere. He's fine, I'm sure. And we begin to see some Union forces emerging from the fog of war. And we can actually see we've got some bigger numbers now at this stage, so I can kind of talk about what we're looking at. The names that we see are the names Phelps, Rogers. These are the names of the brigade commanders. So this is Rogers Brigade, effectively called Rogers Brigade. So these are the brigadier... Well, they'd be brigadier generals, they should be, but due to injury, quite a lot of corporals. So the corporals who would command the regiments have been promoted, or not promoted, but they've been put in charge of brigades. So that's what we're looking at here. A couple of brigades, shove them together, and you get a division. So we'll say the 1st Division here by us is Hoke, Walker, Atkinson, and Latimer. So that's the 1st Division. And then stick a couple of divisions together and you get Corps. Rogers. That's a very Irish sounding name, isn't it? Rogers was the surname of the King of Tory Island who passed away a couple of years ago, and this is indeed the surname of a man of Irish descent, Colonel William Rogers. Now, his father was from Waterford. So we're seeing a Waterford descendant in command of a brigade advancing on the Confederate position. Waterford is quite interesting in the sense that in 1847, Thomas Francis Maher went to France to get a bit of an education. And he returns in 1848, in March, arrives in Waterford with a flag that he was given by the people of Paris, the citizens of Paris. A flag of green, white and orange. 'Tis a damn good flag, people thought. Not as good as putting a naked woman on a harp, but it's a good flag all the same. But from 1916 onwards, that would become adopted, of course, as the Irish flag and as the modern Irish flag. So Thomas Francis Maher brought that to Ireland, arrived in Waterford with it in 1848. And in Waterford today, there is a museum dedicated to Thomas Francis Maher, or at least it has a substantial part of the museum dedicated to him. I included an image of his sword in the intro. And they also have his Carney Cross, which I'll be getting on to shortly. The sword is an odd one, because it could well be the sword that he actually bore in the Battle of Fredericksburg. From what I know, the museum at Fredericksburg borrowed it for their display around the 150th anniversary. But there's also another account that the sword that he had at Fredericksburg was sourced by Senator Mark Daly, and that he presented it. If you have a sword belonging to a great Irish war hero, what modern Irish figure could you imagine that it should be given to? Bertie Ahern. And Bertie Ahern then later gave it to Senator Ted Kennedy, a member of the American Oireachtas. So that's one story about the sword. But Maher's sword that he bore here at the Battle of Fredericksburg was produced by Tiffany & Co. So that's the same company that was told to make the flags that will arrive on the battlefield, according to President Kennedy. Here we have Meredith's Iron Brigade. And here we have Sinclair and McGilton. I'll pause very quickly as we see those troops. We have a couple of kind of things to go over here with them. Like I said, you take a couple of brigades, you shove them together, and you have a division. And McGilton and Sinclair are both members of the division under the command of Major General George Meade. Now, Meade is quite a famous figure. He's going to later go on to command the Army of the Potomac. Major General Meade is his great-grandfather was from Limerick. So he's the descendant of Irish people. The Meade family descends from Limerick. So his great-grandfather was from Limerick, and his grandfather founded the Friendly Sons of St. Patrick in Philadelphia. You'll remember them as well from the bit of the intro video. The Friendly Sons, their president was Robert Patterson, who was discharged in the aftermath of his failure to hold the Confederates from reinforcing Beauregard at the Battle of Bull Run. I knew I had another unit of artillery. I knew there was another unit hanging around somewhere. So we'll start bringing some of these cavalry forward to harass. The Friendly Sons of St. Patrick are a Roman Catholic Irish fraternal organisation that are established in Philadelphia. Regarded as being rather peculiar by the Irish American community, however, apparently, into 1852, they are still toasting the Queen, which would not be, especially in the aftermath of the famine, would not exactly be great, but some Irish officers in the Union Army, or in the American Army at that time, from the description in Ural Bruce's The Harp and the Eagle is that they reverse their glasses during the toast, which I presume to mean they dump their glasses out on the ground during the toast. They're not going to toast the Queen. And from then on, so what we're going to start to do is bring up some forces. From then on, kind of the more conservative members of the Irish community leave the Friendly Sons of St. Patrick, and it becomes kind of not exactly more extremist or anything like that, but kind of, there he is. I knew he was wandering around here somewhere. Hiding in the background, the devil. We'll get them forward to begin the defense of this wall. So that's the Friendly Sons of St. Patrick under Robert Patterson. He is discharged from the army, like I said, for the ineffectiveness of his command. Two of his sons have an equally bad time in the American Civil War. They don't want to command Irish regiments. They don't want to command ethnic Irish regiments. They want kind of more prominent positions. They're kind of concerned a bit about their reputation. One of his sons is to be court-martialed for retreating under false evidence, and manages to accidentally shoot himself and die before his court-martial. So his other son, Paterson's other son, has an equally bad, well, maybe not equally bad, I think that's as bad as you can have a battle. Now, we were looking at Mangleton and we were looking at Sinclair. We're being told that Pender has been wounded, so they're under the command, like I said, of Meade. Sinclair is going to be wounded in the battle, and he is going to be replaced by Colonel William McCandless. I saw that name around a couple of times, and I thought, that's definitely not an Irish name. McCandless was born in Ireland. Not too sure where. Buck McCandless, he was nicknamed. I don't know a lot about him, but Sinclair's brigade is going to be, the command is going to be taken over by McCandless when Sinclair is injured. Sinclair is wounded. You're beginning to see, surely, why I decided to play the Confederates. I'm not going to lie, that's a bad... Smith, that's a bad place. That is a bad place, my good man. Now, the fact that we have these eyes over them, I believe that means that our troops haven't actually been spotted yet. Which is another fantastic thing about this game, is that it really rewards you for putting people in kind of accurate places, we'll say. With a number of these troops, I'll pause very quickly, with a number of these troops, you see some of the names, and you think to yourself, that's an Irish-sounding name, and we're going to see a lot of that later on. I haven't found any proof, but there's somebody commanding one of the brigades, I don't think he actually appears here, called John Kidd Murphy. And he's done something crazy, like, I think he's been involved in the Battle of 1812 and the American Civil War. It's something crazy like that, some lengthy career, and he's still at brigade level. Don't you dare tell me that that's not an Irishman. But I haven't found anything about his actual family or anything like that. There was one guy that I saw pop up and I thought, that's an Irish-sounding name. Off to Wikipedia, clicked on him, and I thought, that is a startled-looking Irish head if I've ever seen one. But nothing about him being Irish. It said his grandfather was a general, so click on him. And his grandfather was the son of Irish migrants, and that is John Cochrane, the great-grandson of Irish migrants. So he's commanding in that direction. The 65th New York Brigade, the 65th New York Regiment, I should say, is part of Cochrane's brigade. And a number of Irishmen are serving in the 65th New York, and they will be killed in the Battle of Gettysburg, including John O'Brien, who leaves a very sad and poignant letter behind him, considering that he sends it in the aftermath of the Battle of Fredericksburg to his mother. Damian Shiels has the full text of it on his blog. I would highly recommend that you go and read it. It's a very sad letter, especially considering it's a letter to his mother. And his mother asks him in an earlier letter how long he's enlisted for. And he tells her that from the 1st of July, 63, he will have a year left. He is killed on the 3rd of July, 63. So those are men under Cochrane's command. Smith, you're in a bit of trouble, my man. You're in a bit of trouble. So I'm trying to send some cavalry up to at least harass Giersch's artillery. Oh, I did not see that we have more artillery back in that direction. We will attempt. This could go poorly. But if we can get a charge on both sides, we should be able to push the units. So Rowley's men have turned and are shooting on Hampton. Now Lee's forces, I actually meant them to charge Giersch as well. They've gone off after Bayard. That's fine, but they're running into some trouble up there. We are seeing some men screaming about ammo. Oh god, there is a supply wagon around here somewhere. So that is keeping you guys fed. Is that the only supply wagon I have? Are you serious? Oh no. So we can see that Pender's forces have been driven from this wall. And we're going to get Grimes forward to try and hold it. Charges, if done properly in this, can be absolutely devastating. Now we are getting into maybe a bad area here. We're not going to be able to. That was a bad mistake. Charges can be devastating if done well, says he, demonstrating how not to do a charge. And it's one of the things here is that the Confederates are in a position where they basically don't need to do a whole amount. I'm basically just acting the devil and harassing some troops back here at the moment. But you don't want to start marching Confederate forces out from the positions that they are in here, because there is no need. Now, Cochrane's men have left the field, from what I can see. The 65th, I should say. The 65th New York Infantry. That includes Irish Americans, Irish and Irish Americans. There he is, he's back again. That'll be killed at Gettysburg. That's pretty symptomatic of what you have here. Like I said earlier on, you have Irishmen that come together and form companies. They try to form ethnic Irish regiments, especially in places like Philadelphia and New York. In certain parts of New York, that's not always possible, and that actually seems to be the case with Devons. He has a number of Irish in his unit from the 5 Points. And they're fighting alongside nativists. So you'd have people that would have grown up alongside the Dead Rabbits, which would have been an Irish and an Irish-American gang. And they're now fighting alongside people from the Bowery region, who would have grown up with the Bowery Boys. And of course, a lot of that history is kind of represented and fictionalized in Gangs of New York. The Irish and Irish migrants and Irish Americans fighting against the nativists. But you now have them fighting alongside in Devon's unit. From what I understand, the 36th New York is made up of both Irish Americans, and nativists. So quite often you'll have the Irish, they can form an entire company, sometimes they can form an entire regiment. God help us! Sometimes they even put a brigade together, but quite often what you just have is isolated Irishmen in nativist companies, nativist regiments. Quite often they will suffer discrimination. And they will attempt to be transferred to Irish regiments. In particular, the 23rd Illinois Regiment, which is known as Mulligan's Irish Brigade. Damn you Irish, will you stop confusing matters? Stop calling regiments brigades. Never, says the Irish. This is a thing that causes a lot of confusion, is everything is a brigade. There are company level brigades, there are regiment level brigades, there are brigade level brigades. Battalions, we love calling battalions brigades for some reason. And Michael Corcoran spends 13 months in prison. When he's eventually released, he will form the Irish Legion. And tragically, towards the end of 1863, he is going to fall from his horse as he is escorting Thomas Francis Maher to a train station, and he will die from his injuries. And that is a devastating loss to the Irish-American community. So here in this section, everything seems to have stopped. Rogers and his men are taking a bit of a break. The Iron Brigade is taking a break. So they're not actually attempting a charge on Prospect Hill. We've gotten Jones' artillery into a bit of a better position. I could bring him forward a bit more. I don't want to go too far forward. And we have these guys here, like I said, they caused a bit of devilment and bedlam. 183 kills to 33 deaths. These guys took a bit of a battering. So I think we've dealt with all of the actual Irish and Irish regiments. Like I said, we have some Irish in Devon's. We have some Irish in Cochrane's brigade, and Cochrane himself is of Irish descent. Sinclair is going to be replaced by an Irishman, and he is being commanded at the moment by George Meade, an Irishman. And Rogers, like I said, is of Irish descent. So I think that is the majority of the Irish on the Union side. And of course, like I said, there's going to be Irish scattered throughout these regiments and throughout these brigades. Now this battle is taking place, you can see it's 4 o'clock on the 13th of December. This battle is taking place at the exact same time as the battle that we're going to be escorted up to shortly. So I think that is the very south of Fredericksburg. So Marye's Hill, or Marye's Height, is over in this direction. And that battle is actually taking place at the exact same point in time. They're taking place together. So I think Thomas has been at the wall since the very start. 561 deaths, 1,700 kills. Lads, these stone walls are doing mighty work. And these guys, they don't have cover, so the numbers are a bit askewed. But they're standing here basically just in case this wall at the front goes. And I need to get forces into position. Well, my friends, I think Jackson and I think others will be tremendously proud, delighted that we have managed to hold the Yankees in position here on the southern position, and now we shall see what is going on the assault of Marye's height. When the battle here started, we had this big lull where the Union forces were marching down and they all marched into position. As soon as the battle starts on the opposite side, we're just going to see artillery. As soon as the button is clicked, there's just going to be artillery flying. The artillery will be striking Fredericksburg itself, and again, to imagine that you're starting in this position, you're marching down and marching through Georgia Street and heading for a charge on the Confederate position. It is staggering. The other thing is that the Confederates have full view of Fredericksburg from these heights. That's why they're called heights. And if we were to start as the Union, basically we would only be able to see about as far as where my cursor is now. We wouldn't even be able to see this second line of artillery. So it's one of the reasons that I've started as the Confederates, is to give you a much greater idea of the actual position that the Union had to attack. The other reason is, as you've seen, I haven't had a lot of work to do. I just sit here. And you might be thinking, that's historically inaccurate, that can't have been the way this played out. That's the way this played out. And there are going to be severe criticisms of the Union command for some of the charges that are made during this battle. The battle on the right flank continues, but a heavy assault has been launched against our fortifications atop Marye's heights. We are entrenched behind a stone wall and reinforced by a large number of cannon. Oh, it's a large number, to say the very least. The crazy Union advance will cost them many men, though. A chicken could not live on that field when we open up on it, and that's actually why I kept these kind of descriptions in. That's an exact quotation from a Confederate artillery gunner. A chicken could not live on that field when we open up on it. And that is a description of the defensive positions that they've dug. The Confederates are outnumbered. They have about 75,000 troops, I believe, in the battle. The Union has 140,000. But due to the delays in getting the pontoon bridges down, the Confederates have been able to dig an absolutely staggering defensive position. Another reason why I've chosen to play as the Confederates is that it gives us an opportunity to look at some Irish Confederate forces that we wouldn't have an opportunity to look at if I played as the Union side, including, he's hiding, he's over there, Mahone. So that is Mahone's brigade, and it is named after its commanding officer, William Mahone, of Irish descent. The total figures given for Irish participation in the American Civil War is 140 to 200,000 Irish on the Union side and 20,000 on the Confederate side. So we have a big discrepancy in the Union number, and then it's just a flat 20 on the Confederate side. When the boats left Ireland, they tended to arrive in New York. And the Irish who settled in New York, they tended to either stay there or move west. Those who arrived in New Orleans, they tended to die. So Paddywhacked, which is a book that I used when I was playing Empire of Sin, about how the Irish developed organised crime in America. You're welcome, America. And they tell us we invented nothing. But that book describes the Irish arriving in New Orleans in the 19th century and basically dying of yellow fever. So there's a lot less Irish travelling to what becomes the Confederacy. I believe during the American Civil War itself, very few head for the Confederacy. There are people in Ireland who are attending the US, not the embassy, but like the attaché in Ireland, and they're offering their service in the Union Army in return for travel to the United States, which is not possible, but there are people in Ireland, American officials, writing back to America saying, we're getting a lot of interest. We should think about doing something. We should think about facilitating these people. So the Irish who arrive in kind of 63 onwards, they were almost solely heading for what is Union territory to enlist in the Union Army. So we don't have many Irish on the Confederate side. We do have a few. Like I said, we have Mahone, and of course, most importantly, most famously, in Cobb's Brigade, we have Cobb's Irish Regiment. A pure, ethnic Irish regiment of Irish who have settled in Georgia, and famously it has a Confederate flag with the harp on it. And this is, of course, I say famously because it's made famous by the movie Gods and Generals. So it has to be true, because Gods and Generals wouldn't lie to us. If you can't trust the movie Gods and Generals, what can you trust? Cobb's Irish Regiment. We'll deal with that shortly. Right. I'm going to have to pause this battle a couple of times because I got flustered trying to talk and deal with the Union attack on Fredericksburg. Wait till you see this. Give it a moment. We've spotted the Union, and we've began firing. So like I said, the Union forces, you can see that there's a dip. It doesn't show it to you, but you can see that there is a dip. Not alone are the Confederates behind a stone wall, there is also a sunken road. And the sunken road at Antietam is basically caused by travel from one farm to another. As goods are being brought along a kind of a boggy area or a marshy area, the road just sinks over time and creates a sunken road. And the Confederates are using that here to absolutely devastating effect. Now already I'm going to begin the process of... I don't know what I'm going to begin the process of, and I need to get back and deal with this because there's going to be some charges coming in. I'm gonna pull Wright's forces and get them ready. You can see some cavalry has been brought into position. We can see that there are forces coming across. We can see that heading down Georgia Street, we have Joshua T. Owen, and just behind him, Thomas Francis Maher. Let's see who's going to be the first. There's Craughwell. There's Hall's units again. Somebody's shouting and cheering, and it's Ferrero. Is Ferrero charging? Ferrero is charging. We'll give it a very quick pause just for a moment. You might be saying to yourself, with a name like Ferrero, surely this man cannot be of Irish descent. And you're right. This is Ferrero's brigade, in which is included the 21st Massachusetts Regiment. Massachusetts, strong Irish and Irish-American community. The 21st was involved in the Battle of Chantilly on September 1st, 1862, so just a couple of months before this battle. And they were in, I believe they were under Ferrero, in Ferrero's division... or not Ferrero's division, I forget whose division they were in, but basically the commander of the other division, Philip Kearny, ordered them to plug a hole in the defences. He was riding out ahead of them and he was shot and killed. Kearny was of Irish descent. He was of a wealthy New York Irish family. He had served with Napoleon III, or he'd served in the armies of Napoleon III at one stage. Kearny is one of the gods of the Irish-American community in the military, of the Irish-American military service at this point in time. The pantheon is made up of Philip Kearny, Philip Sheridan, and Michael Corcoran. Corcoran gets in there because of his snub to the Prince of Wales, which is massive in the Irish-American community. They are tremendously proud of that. Sheridan survives the war. I might be dealing with him. I intend to deal with the Battle of Gettysburg, maybe next year. So we'll leave Sheridan until then. But Kearny's loss is absolutely devastating to the Irish-American community, and he is honoured by the end of 1862 with a medal, Kearny's Medal, which later becomes the Kearny Cross. And this is awarded to Thomas Francis Maher. So again, it shows the esteem that Maher is held in by the Irish-American community during the war and afterwards. And he continues to be revered, but criticisms of Maher will come along later on. Now we have Ferrero charging forward. The 21st Massachusetts is in here. And what we really want to talk about this at this point in time is the involvement of Sergeant Thomas Plunkett from Mayo. Thomas Plunkett he's in the 21st Massachusetts. He's at the rear of the regiment. His job is to basically encourage men who are turning around and preparing to flee as they're advancing forward. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start up the charge. So this is the first charge of the day. I'm going to start up the charge and describe Plunkett's actions. As they are charging, the colour bearer, two of the colour bearers, in quick succession of the regiment are shot down. Plunkett charges forward, picks up the regimental banner, and proceeds forward with it. He will be awarded the Medal of Honour in the aftermath of the Battle of Fredericksburg, and the citation is, seized the colours of his regiment, the colour bearer having been shot down, and bore them to the front, where both his arms were carried off by a shell. So in the charge, shrapnel takes off his right arm at the shoulder and slices through his left wrist. He manages basically to wrap himself in the flag and carry it off the field, where both of his arms are amputated at an emergency station in the city, quite possibly Citizens Hall, which we're going to be talking about later on. And that image of Plunkett is one of the most prominent of the Irish-American sacrifice in the war as a whole. We're seeing some hefty resistance here. Again, Damian Shiels' blog has a fantastic detail on his service, on his involvement in the Battle of Fredericksburg, and on the life that he's going to lead as a double amputee in the aftermath of the Battle of Fredericksburg. So you can see Cobb's Brigade 48 dead, 423 killed. So we're seeing hefty numbers in this region. We're seeing Robinson's forces. They were charging, and I'm not too sure if they have stopped. So we saw Robinson's forces here, and as I started talking about them, we'll continue on. In Robinson's brigade is the 114th Pennsylvania. And this is commanded by Colonel Charles Collis from County Cork. Now I'm just trying to figure out where they've gone to. They could have charged, they could have been repulsed, I'm not too sure. We did see Robinson around there. He's gone off in some direction at the moment. But Charles Collis from Cork, there they are, standing there. We're seeing forces being routed. We're seeing an attack on Cobb's men, and behind that wall they're making a good attempt. Hawkins is coming in against Kershaw. At the start of the war, Collis forms a company, which becomes known as Collis's Zouaves, or the Zouaves Afrique. The Zouaves d'Afrique. They love the Zouaves, do the Irish. So Maher had a unit of Zouaves, Collis has a unit of Zouaves. As Collis is taking part in the advance on Marye's Height with the 114th Pennsylvania, the charge begins to falter. He picks up the regimental colour and charges forward with it, and manages to stabilise the charge. Now the charge is eventually repulsed, but Collis will be awarded the Medal of Honour for his charge at Fredericksburg, and I believe that along with Plunkett, those are the two Irishmen to be awarded the Medal of Honour for their involvement in Fredericksburg. He won't receive that until 1893, however. The Zouave units were popular in the French army. It was the fashion of the time. And it does make me think of one of the very famous tweets from what's referred to as Irish Twitter. of somebody who said, try being fashionable in Ireland. I wore a red beret in town, and somebody shouted at me, look, there goes Super Mario. So I imagine what must the Zouaves have felt like? The Irish Zouaves in all that fancy stuff. So that's Charles Collis from Cork in Robinson's brigade. Here is General Longstreet. I will get him up, and here is something that I did not see. Oh no! Somebody should be paying attention to the battle. It's possible Robinson's men won't actually make any charges, that they'll just kind of hang around here in this position. This section tends to kind of just get bogged down. There's a very solid... Cook's men generally are capable of putting up a very solid defense. I did a test run of this scenario at one stage, and the very first thing that happened was Maher's men charged Marye's height. It's possible that that won't happen today. But we'll go through the brigades. So I've been kind of looking around the battlefield a small bit to see what's going on. Carroll has brought his men way up in this direction. He's getting taken out by a good chunk of artillery fire from our positions up here. So that is Samuel Carroll. His last Irish-born descendant left Offaly in 1688. His grandfather's cousin was the only Roman Catholic signatory of the American Declaration of Independence. So Carroll is another man of Irish descent. He's brought his forces on a rather strange loop. They've suffered a good chunk of losses. And you know what? As he's standing about doing nothing, he's kind of embarrassing me. He's kind of shaming me a bit, I won't lie. Stockton's men are just running through the ranks of Brigadier General James Nagle. God damn it, I thought the man had put up a better performance with a name like that. What a name. Nagle is an Irish surname of Norman descent. And again, it's one of those names that popped up and I thought, this has to be an Irishman. Born in Pennsylvania to John Nagle, who was born in Pennsylvania. His grandfather served in the Continental Army. So it made me think maybe they're of Presbyterian extraction and came across prior to in the late 1700s. Nagle was buried, survived the American Civil War and is buried in a Presbyterian cemetery, so that would support that idea, but I've no evidence as to whether or not he's actually Irish. But you know what, with a name like that, he has to be. We'll claim him as one of our own. And the reason that I focus on him, even without any evidence of him being Irish, first of all, if you look for Nagle in any of the Irish-American accounts, you will get the account of a William Nagle, who writes a very critical letter in the aftermath of the Battle of Fredericksburg. Oh, this is what I didn't want. This is what I didn't want. Oh, Lord. So William Nagle writes a very critical letter in the aftermath of the Battle of Fredericksburg. But the reason that we're focusing on Brigadier General James Nagle is because you mightn't know this, but there is an Irish YouTuber with the same surname. You may, without knowing it, have watched some of his content. I would be very surprised if you haven't watched any of his content. Make some videos on Crusader Kings 3. I have no doubt that some of you have figured out who I'm referring to. I am, of course, talking about Daithí den Ógla from Limerick. 7.5 million followers on YouTube. Fair play to him, he's doing well for himself. So den Ógla is the Irish surname from which Nagle is anglicised. I think Daithí just calls himself Nógla now, but with a couple of other Irish streamers, they did the big CK3 video, unveiling video there at the start. So there you go, a famous Irish YouTuber called Nagle. And there is Brigadier General James Nagle. I don't know where he's after going to. I'd say he's after heading off. He's maybe gone to watch some videos or something. We saw Switzer. There's Nagle We saw Switzer's troops coming in as well. They've gone. There's Switzer. He's made it to the front line. The 9th Massachusetts is a regiment under Colonel Switzer. So usually it's a brigadier general that commands a brigade, but quite often what's going to happen is that due to injuries, people are going to be put in charge of the brigade before they have an opportunity to be promoted. The 9th Massachusetts was founded by Thomas Cass from County Laois, and he dies as a result of wounds received at the Battle of Malvern Hill in July of 62. At this stage, it's under the command of Colonel Patrick Guiney from Tipperary. So they're in, that's the 9th Massachusetts in Switzer's brigade. The reason that they are also of interest to us is because another man who is quite likely, he's in there somewhere, is Timothy Deasy from Cork and his brother Cornelius. The Deasy brothers fight throughout the Virginia campaign, which is what we're dealing with here. Welcome to Virginia. And Timothy Deasy, there they go now. Timothy Deasy in 1867 is going to be sent to Ireland with Thomas Kelly, who is a member of the 10th Ohio Regiment. He's from Galway, fighting with the Army of the Cumberland, so they're off at a completely different part. But Kelly and Deasy will be sent to Ireland to help organise the 1867 rebellion and to represent the Fenian Brotherhood. The 1867 rebellion is a disaster. Deasy and Kelly escape to England. They escape capture, but they are captured in Manchester. Or they're captured in England, and as they're being escorted through Manchester in a prison wagon, members of the Irish community there basically hold up the wagon and break Deasy and Kelly out. A police officer is killed in the escape, and 3 Irishmen are arrested and tried and executed for the escape. And they will become known as the Manchester Martyrs. And they enter the pantheon of Irish Republican and Revolutionary heroes. There are many, many monuments created to the Manchester Martyrs throughout the country, both in that time period and afterwards. So Thomas Deasy with Switzer's brigade, they've retreated off the field at the moment. There's Nagel, still doing nothing. Nagel, oh god damn you to hell, man, you're disappointing me. You're disappointing me. Maher, I don't know what to say about you. So like I said, we're beginning to see this area of the field kind of stabilize. Ward, Berry and Carr are staying back, and they're not entirely doing a huge amount at the moment. Joseph Carr is the son of Irish migrants, and next to him is the brigade of Brigadier General Berry, in which is the 37th New York Regiment. And the 37th New York was founded by John McCoon from Derry. So we have a lot of people from Derry, some of which I've gone through and some of which I haven't, taking part here. I think on Damian Shiels' website he has a dedicated section on people from the county of Donegal who take part in the American Civil War that he has found through pension records. So Carr is the descendant of he's the son of Irish migrants, and then we have lots of Irish in the 37th New York. So if I am correct, we've actually gotten through a good chunk of the Irish at this stage. The Irish Brigade, standing there, happy out for itself, consists of 5 regiments. So it consisted for a while of the 63rd, the 69th and the 88th New York, but was later joined by the 29th Massachusetts, which was a nativist regiment. It was made up of, some of the members were descendants of those who'd come across on the Mayflower. They did not enjoy being in the Irish Brigade, and they have left just before the Battle of Fredericksburg. There are some accounts because they refused to accept a green standard and they insulted the Irish. Some accounts that they didn't want to accept it because they felt that they would dishonour the Irish. They weren't Irish and they felt it would be inappropriate to have it. And other accounts say that they didn't want to be mistaken for Fenians. But the 28th Massachusetts is an Irish regiment, and that joins just before the Battle of Fredericksburg, as does the 116th Pennsylvania. So while Maher is standing there losing troops, I'll go through some of the numbers. The 28th Massachusetts is commanded here today by Colonel Richard Burns from County Cavan. He's going to be killed in the Battle of Cold Harbour, mortally wounded and dies from his wounds in 1864. The 63rd New York is commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Richard Bentley. He's going to be wounded and replaced by Major Joseph O'Neill from Cork, who is going to be wounded and replaced by Captain Patrick Condon from Limerick. The 69th New York is overseen by Colonel Robert Nugent from County Down. He's going to be wounded and replaced with Captain James Saunders from Tyrone. We'll deal with Nugent very quickly for a moment. When Nugent is wounded, he's going to return to New York, and we've actually managed to see out the battle without a charge from Maher. So I'm going to deal with that in a moment. I'll deal with Nugent very quickly. So Nugent is wounded, and he returns to New York, and as he's recuperating, in July of 1863, the draft riots are going to break out. And Nugent is going to take part in attempting to suppress them, to restore order. These are riots by predominantly Irish and also German migrants and other groups against the draft, which has just been introduced. I'm going to deal with this more in the Battle of Gettysburg video. It's going to be attacks on African-American neighbourhoods, and members of the African-American community are going to be killed by Irish rioters rioting over the draft. Nugent attempts to restore order. His house is raided by the rioters and they destroy everything in there except for the pictures of Michael Corcoran. Also in this battle, in which Maher didn't do anything, I'm disappointed, we had the 88th New York under the command of Colonel Patrick Kelly from Galway. So because he just stood there doing nothing, Maher is basically going to be removed. He's going to resign in May of 63. He's going to offer his resignation. That'll be accepted. Kelly will take over command. When Colonel Richard Burns of the 28th Massachusetts returns, he will be given command of the brigade. When he is killed at Cold Harbour in 64, command will go back to Patrick Kelly. He is killed in action at the siege of Petersburg. And then after that, Nugent will be given command of the brigade until the end. And also we would have had the 116th Pennsylvania, commanded by Colonel Dennis Heenan from Tipperary. He's wounded and replaced by Sinclair Mulholland from County Antrim. And then he's wounded and replaced by Lieutenant Francis Quinlan from County Cork. Right, Maher made absolutely no charge on Marye's Height whatsoever. The battle is going to continue based on the positions that we have here. So we might yet be in a position to deal with Cobb's Irish Regiment and the charge of the Irish Brigade. It would have actually occurred by now. So I'm going to click continue and we'll see the next part of the battle, where it's going to take us to. So this is a hard fight. We can still claim victory if we hold at least 2 strategic locations. Marye's Heights must be held at all costs. And then we come down in this direction. And we see the Telegraph Road must not be weakened because the Union may try to seize that location and cut our army into 2 pieces. The rest of our forces are engaged on the right flank. Hell's bells, and the shooting still goes on. So we're now looking at a part of the map from the last time. We're going to see Union forces appearing in really strange positions, and there's not a whole heap that we can do. The flank has been extended, has it? Maybe not. I thought it was going to be extended a bit up in this direction. It has been, has it? No. So there's Mahone. Yeah, no, it's the same as always. And we have the forces holding out here. I'm not too sure if we need to relieve Cobb. So I have right in position. Yeah, Wright will go forward and relieve Cobb if it becomes necessary. The Union are going to just continue pouring in forces. We're going to see a couple more coming up in this direction. We're going to see some in this direction down here. So we'll see how this plays out. And now, after my big long spiel, he heard me talking about him. Maher's men advance across the mill race. Hill, or Hall I should say, has gone in. Andrews has gone in. Owen, Joshua T. Owen is up there. Carr, son of Irish migrants, is challenging Kershaw's position. And here we are. This is what I was waiting for. This is why this entire video is being made. The charge of Maher's men on Marye's Height, on the Irish Regiment under the command of Cobb. So this is a famous scene, a very famous scene from Gods and Generals, which stars a young Miles Fisher. That man's cover of the Talking Head song is absolutely fantastic. And like I said, very historically accurate, massive amounts of historical accuracy went into the film. I've never heard anyone complain about it. And especially not the part of the challenge on Cobb's Irish Regiment. So that is the 24th Georgia Regiment, under the command of Antrim-born Robert Macmillan. And his son is also in the regiment. And many years later, Antrim-born Sinclair Mulholland, who is proceeding up the hill with the 116th Pennsylvania, he will write an account of this charge. And he will describe how, as they approached the wall, the Irish of Maher's brigade were recognised by the Irish of Cobb's regiment, and the terrible wailing and the terrible sadness that was felt, and how they said, "Oh, what a pity, here comes Maher's fellow." And in the movie, you have the Irish charging with some regimental colours, and with the green sprigs in their hats, and more Irishmen behind the wall, tears streaming down their face, shooting on the Irish Brigade, which is eventually driven back. It's a tremendously sad moment, it's a tremendously poignant moment, and it's complete and utter bullshit. The Confederates had very few, if any, ethnic Irish. I don't think they had any ethnic Irish regiments. They were able to form ethnic Irish companies. The Macmillan Guards, Cacoy, of the 24th Georgia, is not one of them. Macmillan is pretty much, and his son, are pretty much the only Irishmen in it. There is, however, in Philip's Legion, which is also at the wall, it's a regiment in the 24th Georgia, is the Loughran Guards, F Company of Philip's Legion, known as the Loughran Guards. There is a significant amount of Irish in that. And I've seen some lists of the names of the people. There's a lot of Aherns, there's a lot of Dowds, there's a lot of Irish names in Philip's Legion, or in the Loughran Guards, I should say. And also, E Company of Philip's Legion is commanded by Captain Joseph Hamilton from County Tyrone. When his commanding officer is killed, Hamilton will take over command of Philip's Legion. And indeed, when Cobb is wounded, Macmillan will take over command of Cobb's brigade. There have been a number of accounts, like I said, and I'll post one of them below, showing that there are very few Irish in Cobb's brigade. There is most certainly not enough to form a regiment. Any Irish that are here are part of Philip's Legion, predominantly. And indeed, as the men are coming up the hill against Cobb's brigade, Macmillan sees them, and he says to his men, "Here comes Maher's brigade. Let them have it. Give it to them now, boys. Give it to them now." So there is no sympathy from Macmillan for his fellow Irishmen coming up the hill against him. There is an entire industry online, and I'll post some of the links below, of videos discussing the fallacies, we'll start up again, in Gods and Generals, and how it is by and large lost cause propaganda. It is an entire industry. And the flag, the Georgia flag with the harp on it, is a complete and utter fabrication. No such thing ever existed, and it was created purely for the movie by the writers. And I'll post a link to a blog by somebody who's done a lot of research into it and who has kind of torn apart the idea of Cobb's Irish regiment, which was completely fabricated for the Gods and Generals movie. The best thing about that movie was Miles Fisher. And there's Maher and his men gone. In that charge, the Irish Brigade becomes one of only a handful of men to actually make it. Ransom, you get back to that wall. The Irish Brigade are one of only a handful to make it within 50 yards of the wall. So we've seen a lot of actual charges on the wall today. That didn't happen. Very few people actually made it to the wall. The Irish are one of the few, and they are identified in the aftermath by the green sprigs in their hats, as they lie a couple of as their dead bodies lie a couple of feet out from the wall. In total, the Irish Brigade suffers about 45% casualties. 55 officers are killed and wounded, on top of the 24 officers killed, wounded, and missing from the Battle of Antietam. It is a devastating loss. The 69th, 16 officers went into that charge. 2 of them are killed, 14 of them are wounded. The 69th loses potentially 112 men out of 173 that went into the battle. The following morning, one of the accounts says that the brigade is only able to muster 250 men. They've lost potentially 545 in total. So out of that number of 1,200 that Kennedy and that a lot of other people quoted, that President Kennedy quoted in Dáil Éireann, 545 dead, missing, and wounded would seem to be pretty accurate. We'll take a bit of a pause there just briefly as we see some cavalry coming across. So some cavalry has come onto the field, which has confused me a slight bit because of the way it is represented. Up here we have Farnsworth's Brigade, which includes the 8th Illinois, under the command of Colonel William Gamble from Fermanagh. And then we have Gregg and Devon, who I thought made up a single brigade, so I'm not too sure. But this is Colonel Thomas Devon, son of Irish migrants, commanding the 6th New York Cavalry, if I am correct. We might have some of the same names peering around the place, and that's pretty much all of the Irish dealt with. There's one more moderate reference, and that is after those divils in the 29th refused to receive the flag, to take a flag from the Irish Brigade, they were sent off to join Christ. They were sent off to Christ. And there he is. So the 29th Massachusetts, who would have served with the Irish Brigade up until prior to Fredericksburg, they are just about to engage. So we see Maher's troops have been driven off the field. I'm not too sure where they've gone to. Is that them retreating through Hall's forces? That could very well be them retreating through Hall's forces. Father William Corby, who is becomes famous for delivering general absolution to the men about to go into battle at Gettysburg. There is Maher making another charge. Fair play to him. William Corby says that the place into which Maher's brigade was sent was simply a slaughter pen. And this is again another criticism of the tactics used by the Union generals in making constant, continuous charges on this height. Maher's brigade is said to have favoured an outdated musket so that they could fire buck and a ball. I'm going to put up some videos in the description, and I'll link one of them up at the top, showing what buck and ball would have looked like. You're talking about a 69 caliber ball and 3 30 caliber buckshot. Devastating at close range. There is a perception that it was ineffective at longer range. It meant that the men had to get in quite close, and when you're charging uphill and into a battle like this, you're basically asking for problems. I think it's David Power Cunningham who says that it was not a battle, it was a wholesale slaughter of human beings, sacrificed to the blind ambition and incapacity of some parties. And that is basically a reference to General Ambrose Burnside for the continuous charges that are made here on Marye's Heights. And Maher's brigade, they've managed to reform, but the reality is that after the first charge through on Marye's Heights, they fell back. And as the battle was ending, and as they were falling back through Fredericksburg, shells landing on Fredericksburg, buildings being knocked around them, Maher's brigade commandeered Citizens Hall. Like I said, somewhere in this region. Potentially it had served as a medical facility. Potentially it is where Thomas Plunkett had his arms amputated. And they held a dinner to celebrate the arrival of their battle standards. They invited all of the dignitaries of the army, including Brigadier General Hancock, or Major General Hancock. And as the Irish served food and served drinks and played music, as cannon shells destroyed buildings around them, Hancock commented, "Only an Irishman could enjoy themselves thus." It was at this point in time that I attempted to do something quite foolish. I attempted, and failed utterly, to deliver a succinct and coherent conclusion to this video, with rifle fire and cannon fire falling about the field. When I had notes to operate off of, it was fine, which I could shuffle through in panic as brigades and figures came onto the field. But I was going off notes for the conclusion. There's still a good bit of this battle to go. So we still have this entire phase left, and then there is another phase. But we've seen most of the major Irish figures. What did you think of the format? How did you find the format? Was the cannon fire and the rifle fire a bit too loud, a bit too distracting? Did you actually enjoy following the trials and triumphs of the various Irish figures and the various Irish brigades? I think utilizing Ultimate General Civil War in this way really helped me to get a better appreciation of what exactly the Union faced at the Battle of Fredericksburg. In particular, the defensive positions of the Confederates. So for our conclusion, the battle is effectively over on the 13th. There's going to be a lull on the 14th and 15th. And on the 16th, the Confederate forces are going to wake up to find that the Union forces have withdrawn back across the Rappahannock. It is a devastating Confederate victory. 13,000 Union casualties to 5,000 Confederate casualties. 13,000 puts the Union losses on par with, if not greater than, what they suffered at Antietam. It is, however, around Marye's Heights and around the dead bodies of the Irish Brigade that the most intense fighting is seen. 7,000 Union casualties to 1,700 Confederate casualties. Absolutely staggering numbers, and really goes to show you the defensive position that the Confederates had built. Now, I addressed the Irish Brigade's losses at Fredericksburg, possibly between 45 to 50% casualties, and it looks like the standards that they were presented with in Citizens Hall were taken back to New York and put into storage until the brigade got back up to brigade strength. That doesn't ever really happen again, and it's possible that they're actually kept in storage until the end of the war. They are brought out for the Grand Review, the Victory Parade, in 1865, and then they go back into storage in the 69th Armory, where they are found sometime later. by John F. Kennedy and some of his researchers, and it looks like they actually thought that they had been carried at Antietam, and a speech was written about this by the looks of it, and then had to be frantically changed at the last minute when they realized, no, that couldn't be possible. And that's why the wrong date is given for Fredericksburg, and there's a couple of other mistakes. He puts it in the wrong area as well, I think. So President Kennedy makes a couple of mistakes in his speech to the Oireachtas. That is one of the most important moments in the modern Irish nation. It's one that we don't really think about today, but the return of the great-grandson of Irish migrants who left Ireland impoverished, destitute, with little hope or opportunity, and now their great-grandson is returning as the most powerful man in the world. This was 40-something years out from the end of the Irish Civil War. If even that, it was actually 40 years out from the end of the Irish Civil War. And it was the first time that the Oireachtas, that both houses of the Oireachtas had been convened and addressed. It was the first visit by a US president. It was a major event for the Irish nation, and of course there was utter devastation when Kennedy was assassinated a few months later. And there are still people today, an uncle of mine I know has a portrait of John F. Kennedy, and this would have been very common in Irish homes. Now, I'm not going to deal too much with the Irish Brigade because we'll be meeting them again in a much reduced capacity at Gettysburg, but it's not looking great for them in the years ahead. This is pretty much the last high point of the Irish Brigade, even into 1864, when they're brought back up to a strength of 2,500 men. 80% of those will have been recruited that spring. So that's the level of losses that they are looking at going forward. At one stage, they're going to be, the 3 New York regiments are going to be decreased to 2 company battalions. The 116th Pennsylvania is going to be decreased, and Sinclair Mulholland will take a voluntary demotion, the way he can stay with his troops. The Irish Brigade, in the aftermath of Fredericksburg, is denied leave, and this is viewed in the Irish American community as an insult and as a slight. What has happened is that the War Department has issued too many regiments and too many brigades with leave. The Army has asked them to stop, and so they deny leave to the Irish Brigade, which is in a very bad state at this stage. Maher has gone back to New York to recover from his injury, and while there he tries to recruit for the brigade. It's not going well, and the refusal to give them leave is not helping matters. He petitions the War Department for leave. He goes over their head and goes to President Lincoln in February, which makes no friends. He tries to get more time off to recruit troops. He's technically absent without leave at one stage, and in frustration, he's going to offer his resignation in May of 1863, and it is pretty much accepted immediately. There's a lot of people who view Maher as just a political appointment that Lincoln made to keep the Irish community on side, and there would have been a number of political appointments like this in the early days of the war. So his resignation is accepted in May of 63. He does rescind this later on, and he is brought back into the army, but he is never again connected with the Irish Brigade, and he will eventually be dismissed from the army for drunkenness. In the aftermath of the Civil War, as we won't really be hearing from Maher going forward, in the aftermath of the Civil War, he will be rewarded by the Republican administration because he is, of course, a Republican. He is a rare Irish Republican in the American sense, and he is rewarded with the governorship of Montana. But on the 1st of July, 1867, he will disappear off the back of a steamboat and into the depths of mystery. There are allegations it was murder, that it was suicide, or that he was drunk. His body was never found. And so ends the dramatic life of Thomas Francis Maher. There are, however, many more stories of bravery from the Irish American community to come in the war, not alone stories of bravery ahead, but stories of bravery that I missed for today's episode. In the couple of hours that have passed since I finished the recording and started the editing, I've discovered that Timothy Deasy of the 9th Massachusetts, when he is being taken through the streets of Manchester in a prison wagon. There is an attempt to rescue him, and that rescue attempt is organised by Edward O'Maher Condon, who, at the Battle of Fredericksburg, was fighting in the 69th Regiment. So that just goes to show you that there are plenty more Irish on the fields of Fredericksburg who I've missed. There's also a brigade commander, Briney or Brinny, who I had notes on but they didn't actually appear, the grandson of an Irish-born slave owner in the United States, and the son of an Irish-American abolitionist. But I didn't actually see him on the battlefield today. If you have any stories of Irish bravery on the fields of Fredericksburg that I missed, please do post them in the comment section below, or any stories from the Irish community from the American Civil War. If you have any references or sources, any books on the Irish-American involvement in the American Civil War, particularly on the Confederate side, which is an area that I am quite weak on, I'd love to hear about those. If you found any mistakes, I am sure there are a few in this video, please do post them, because it's important for them to be kind of put in there for future viewers to look at, as such as my misdelivery of Hancock's words at the dinner in Citizens Hall. Only Irishmen could enjoy themselves thus. Not only an Irishman could enjoy themselves thus. As I was saying it, I knew it was wrong, but I didn't have it. Of all my copious notes, which I wafted around, I didn't have it written down in front of me. So thank you all very much for joining me on this look at the Irish and Irish-American community in the Battle of Fredericksburg. Not alone the Irish Brigade, the most famous of the Irish ethnic units to fight in the conflict, but we got to look at some of the Irish on the Confederate side, some of the Irish in the other regiments, and some of the myths that have grown up around Irish involvement, such as Cobb's Irish Regiment, and the banners that were carried on the field of Fredericksburg. I should comment, and I forgot to mention this, where's the banner now? So the banner was given to the Oireachtas in 1963. Where's the banner now? It went into storage in the Oireachtas, and it seems to still be there. It was apparently in the lobby for a period of time, but you can do a tour of the Dáil, and it's not there anymore. However, earlier in the year, a committee in the Dáil put forward a motion that the banner be put on display. So we are approaching the 160th anniversary of Gettysburg, and we're approaching the 160th anniversary of the end of the American Civil War, and we're also, of course, approaching the end of the decade of centenaries, and it would have been tremendous if something could have been done to commemorate the Irish and Irish-Americans who took part in the American Civil War during the decade of centenaries, as we commemorated the formation of the Irish Volunteers, Irish involvement in the First World War, the 1916 Rising, the War of Independence, and the Civil War. It would have been great if we could have done something, and there were opportunities, and they were kind of passed up and missed, which is a bit of a disappointment. Damian Shiels on his blog has some entries on that, on the lackluster Irish involvement in the 150th commemoration of the Battle of Fredericksburg in 2012, which would have been just at the start of the decade of centenaries. So it was a fantastic opportunity, and sad to see that it was kind of missed by the Irish government. So like I was saying, thank you all very much for joining me on this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found it some way interesting. I hope the use of Ultimate General Civil War added something to your understanding of the Irish in the American Civil War. If you've made it this far, fair play to you. You're approaching an hour and a half, 2 hours at this stage. Please do give the video a like. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already to be kept up to date with new videos coming out on Irish history in video games and the representation of Ireland in various different types of media. Do go and check out some of the other videos I've done, especially the Cyberpunk video. I put a lot of work into that, and it's not doing great. It does not best please the algorithm. The algorithm is not pleased. So if you could throw a look at it, it might wake up the algorithm. Wait, who's it showing it to? It's like one of the... It's getting recommended on a video about Gregorian chanting. Who is watching a video on Gregorian chanting and thinks, do you know what I want to watch? The representation of the Irish in the Cyberpunk tabletop role-playing game. Oh look, there's a video on the recommended. Fantastic. If you've come from that Gregorian chanting video, welcome. Hello. I hope you're enjoying your stay here. But to the rest of you, thank you all very much for joining me. And I look forward to seeing you on the battlefield at Gettysburg.